Hello kids, and welcome back to my third weekly chess lesson. At the end of the second lesson, which went up on the last day of April, this one will be May 7th, I went over this puzzle briefly, and today I'm going to show you the answer to said puzzle. So, in this position, it is White's turn to move, and White will have a mate in 3. So on the third move, on White's third move in this position, White will be checkmating Black. So you guys have had a long time to look at this. So I hope that you looked at it. If not, the position is still set up, so if you didn't get a chance to see my last video, go ahead, see if you can figure it out. But the move is actually, as I said, it involves a sacrifice. Bishop to f3. Now you may be thinking, Carson, what the heck? How are you going to play bishop to f3 and hope to accomplish anything in this position, because you're just going to lose it? And my point is, yes, you need the bishop gone in this position, because when it's on the board, this pawn cannot move. When it's back here, or it's any other spot in this diagonal, except for f3, this pawn cannot move, because it is pinned to the king. If the pawn does move, even still, if the pawn moves straight ahead, the bishop is checking the black king. You can't have that, so that's an illegal move. So the only way to eliminate this problematic bishop when it's in the corner here is to put it right in harm's way. Mind blown, I know. This took me 10 to 15 minutes to figure out. Looking at this, I was very frustrated, and I saw this first move, but I could not ultimately figure out the whole puzzle. So if you saw this quickly, or maybe you didn't, that's okay. But if you did, congratulations, you're ahead of me, and you're probably a lot younger than me anyway. So with this move, the black pawn on g2, it is actually black's only legal move, because the h2 pawn is blocked. The king cannot move anywhere. The h2 pawn's blocked by this knight. The king cannot move to g1 because you can't have two kings next to each other. I said that in both videos. So the only legal move here for black, as I said, it was g2 pawn is pinned, is to actually take this bishop. Now you may be thinking, oh goodness, this pawn here is has a dream to become a queen, and if you don't take it here, then that dream is going to be realized. Well, what's the problem with king takes pawn? And this is a mistake I made when I first looked at this puzzle. King takes pawn is a stalemate. This h2 pawn is still blocked. Can't move anywhere because of that knight. The knight also covers g1, and the king covers g2. So you stalemate by doing that. So you have that first move now. The knight's in a good spot. It's blocking that key escape square, and we want to keep this escape square blocked. So where can we move the king to do that without taking the pawn? That answer, of course, is f1. Black's king is still trapped. Black's pawn is still trapped. So the f pawn pushes because it's black's only legal move. White now has the only move that would put black in check, and that, of course, is checkmate. Knight to f2, checkmate. Black cannot escape because of the king to either square in the g file, and its own pawn blocks it in the corner. So if you saw anything remotely close to how to figure this out, you, my friend, are brilliant, and you need to keep studying more chess, because one day you should be able to compete in some tournaments and probably win some tournaments. So that's that puzzle. So now I'm going to take this pawn and this knight off the board, and I'm going to go over what I like to call the king-pawn endgame. Now, if you are smart in this position, this isn't going to be the actual position, excuse me. I'm going to set it up something like, this. So I've got a black king. Of course, the black pawns move from the 7th rank, it would be, because they set up on the 7th, down to the 1st, and the white pawns move from the 2nd to the 8th. So black in this position has a pawn, has likely a way to win the game, but we're going to say that it's white's turn to move here. And the goal for white, having just a king, is of course to stalemate the game. Move that board a bit so you guys can see it. The goal for white, of course, being to stalemate the game, because with just a king, you cannot win a game. So white's turn to move, and the only logical move, you want to keep the white king in front of the pawn as best as you can, but of course you have to make a move. If you can't keep it in front of the pawn, keep it in front of the king. That way, you might think you don't want to have the two kings across from each other, because you won't be able to really escape. But the goal is to restrict how easily this black king can escort his pawn, so to speak. So the move, as I kind of alluded to, king to g4. Black player likely plays f5. We call that pushing. You want to try and push the pawn, keep moving it down the board, trying to make him realize his dream of becoming a queen. In this position, as I said, you want to keep the king and the pawn squared up, nicely, lined up, whatever you want to say. There you go. So now he's in front of the pawn. Now this king has a dilemma. He has to protect this pawn because I'm still attacking him. He's got to go here. But that's not really doing anything. We can play this game all day long. So I'm going to go back and let him keep doing his thing. So say black now moves to e5. His job is to protect that pawn, but I also want to attack that pawn. And as long as that happens, it's neutralized, and it's a tie game for all intents and purposes. And what does a tie game mean? A stalemate for white, meaning black does not beat us. So the black pawn pushes. The interesting thing about the pawns here, one of the many interesting things, that the pawn, as you know, moves straight forward one space, but it attacks g3 and e3. It attacks diagonally. So the king, of course, cannot move to those spaces. So let's keep it moving. Black in this position is not going to put its own pawn in harm's way and lose the game so easily, or not win the game, tie the game so easily. He's going to push with the king. And now, as I said, it's time to restrict the king a little bit more. The king can now no longer come in the king cannot move into the 3rd rank when you play e2, because it's a cross. Pawn pushes to f3. King comes right back. King comes right back. Only logical move to protect the pawn. So now things get a little dicey. So we move back to the 1st rank, and let's say the king goes this way. What's our move? Again, keeping with our wonderful tradition of restricting where the king goes, you move him across from the black king on g1. Black's going to push. This is check. The checks really don't matter as much in this position. White has to move his king anyway, so if I haven't been calling check on every move, it's just kind of assumed. But white's going to move right here to f1, and suddenly we have a stalemated game, because any move black plays here is stalemate. If he moves to anywhere in the H file, or anywhere in the 4th rank, king takes pawn. King and king, game over. Stalemate. He cannot move to g2 because you can't have two kings next to each other. His only other option is to move to f3. And of course, moving to f3 is stalemate. Our turn to move. We have no legal moves. g1 and e1 are both protected by this pawn. We cannot move into check. g2 and e2, both kings next to each other, and king takes on f2 to show it. We once again, the pawn was protected by the king, two kings next to each other. You cannot have two kings next to each other, as I've said many, many times. So, I hope you found that video interesting. Please continue to watch them. Don't drive your parents too crazy. And you'll hear from me next week on Thursday, May 14th. Thank you. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a nice week.